Hello everybody and welcome to the DI build kit video. I'm very excited to be sharing this with you and I hope that you all enjoy the DI. So for the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and start with R1, R2, R10, and R11, which are 6.8Ks. We'll go ahead and get these installed. Flip the PCB over. And then we'll go ahead and get them soldered in. And make sure that the leads are clipped. Awesome, now that we've done that, we can go ahead and flip the PCB back over and start working on some more of the resistors. So next we're going to go to R3 and R4, which are 100 ohm resistors. We'll go ahead and flip the PCB over, solder those in, and get the leads clipped. After that, I would move on to the 10K resistors, which are going to be R5, R6, R7, R8, and R9. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my 100K resistor, which is R13. And finally, I will go ahead and flip the PCB and get them all soldered in and get my leads clipped. Awesome. So that is all of the resistors on the board. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to the diodes. So for these diodes, you're going to want to make sure that the line on the diode lines up with the line on the PCB. Cathode to cathode, and these sit very snugly in the PCB and they should sit right in their little spot. So we'll go ahead and get those both installed, flip the PCB, solder them in, and clip the leads. Now that the diodes are installed, I think we can go ahead and get started on the capacitors. We'll start with the smallest capacitor, which is C7. For this capacitor, you're going to want to make sure that the leads are a little bit bent because they won't quite sit into the PCB unless you bend those leads a little bit. And then even then, it won't sit completely flush to the PCB, but that's okay. It'll sit just about like I'm showing you here. And yeah, so once that's sitting like that, go ahead and get those soldered in and the leads clipped. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the IC socket before I do any of those other taller components. And the IC socket is a little bit difficult to get in because it doesn't really like to stay. You can see it kind of wobbles around in there. So what I like to do is flip it over, solder one or maybe two pads while pushing from the back. And then go ahead and solder the rest in. Now, I don't really need to clip those leads because they're not really that long, so I'm going to go ahead and just flip it back over and get started on the capacitors. Now, the capacitors that I'm going to be putting in here are slightly different than the ones that you've gotten from your kit. They're the same value, they're just slightly different form factor. These are the ones that I had on hand, and this is going to be C1 and C2. These are electrolytic, so you have to make sure that they go in the right orientation. The positive is the longer lead, and that goes towards the side that says positive. Next, we're going to go ahead and move on to C1, which is also a polarized electrolytic capacitor. So just make sure that the leads are facing the right way. There's a little plus sign next to R7. That's where the longer lead should go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and install C4 and C5. And these are non-polarized in your kit, so do not worry about the orientation. Just make sure to solder them in and clip those leads. After we've got the capacitors in, it's time for the voltage regulator, and the metal portion of the voltage regulator goes towards the back of the PCB, or like the bottom of the PCB. And again, like the IC socket, it's a little bit hard to get this to sit correctly, so what I like to do is just solder one pad and kind of get it lined up from the back while holding the soldering iron on it. and then I go ahead and solder in the rest of those pads and clip the leads. Awesome. Now that we have that done, that is all of the components that you'll have to solder onto the board. So after you've gotten all of those on, it's time to go ahead and put that IC in the socket. So for this, you're going to want to make sure that it's sitting nice and snug inside that socket. Make sure it's fully engaged in each pin, and the little cutaway that kind of looks like a D should be facing towards the left side of the PCB if you're looking at it from the front. Now it's time to go ahead and get the jacks soldered in. I'm going to start with 1/4 inch, and the way that it goes on the PCB, we have ground towards the bottom, and so that will be our sleeve, and then our tip goes towards the top. So I'll go ahead and get those soldered in here. And once those are soldered in, we're going to go ahead and do the other jack just the exact same way. Tip towards the top and sleeve towards the bottom. Now that we've done that, it's time to finally get our XLR in. And if we're looking at the board from the front, the pins go 1, 2, 3 on the XLR. So we'll do ground is 1, hot is 2, and cold is 3. And then there you go. That's the finished DI kit, and you're ready to put it inside the casing. Alright, here it is. It's chilling right there. Let's give it some phantom power and get it going. Cool. Phantom power is on. I'll turn up the preamp a little. And I got my bass plugged in right now. So here's a little sound test for bass. Sick. It sounds good on the bass. I use my neck pickup. I get a lot of bass. Cool. Use the bridge pickup. Sounds like the bass bridge. And a little mix of that in the middle. Sounds nice. Now I'll switch to guitar. Nice. Alright, cool. So this is the neck pickup as a humbucker. This is the neck pickup as a single coil. This is the bridge pickup as a humbucker. Nice. And now the bridge pickup as a single coil. Sick. And now both single coils. Polarity inverted. Normal polarity, both humbuckers. Now polarity inverted, both humbuckers. And now top single coil, bottom humbucker, polarity inverted. Now top humbucker, bottom single coil, polarity inverted. Sick.